Hello. I've been meaning to get to this one for a while. I've just been lazy about it for some reason. I actually finished this series uh, almost a month ago. That's how lazy I've been about it. But fuck it, we're getting to it now. Let's see if I remember it all. I think I do. I'm talking about the Disney Plus Marvel series, Hawkeye, on Disney Plus, as I already mentioned. Um, it's a 6 episode series, which makes it a bit shorter than which makes it the shortest of the Marvel series so far. It was, I want to say, pretty good. Of all the shows, it seems to be the one that's like all the shows recently have definitely been influenced. They've come directly as a result of the previous Avengers movies, most specifically influenced by Avengers Endgame. And this movie is no exception. It has also been greatly influenced by Avengers Endgame, as have all the other shows that came out this year. It's hard to think that they've all come out this year, but they had, or not this year, last year. We're already in the, but still, it's hard to think that all those shows came out in one year. That was a really long year. Anyways, they all were directly influenced by Avengers Endgame. But this movie was also, I see why they waited for it, because not only is it a very Christmas themed show, which was fitting because I think the first episode was the week of Thanksgiving, and the last episode was on the week of Christmas. So it literally just spanned the entire, basically that Christmas holiday season, which was nice. So it was a Christmas episode, but also because it had to wait for the Black Widow movie to come out, because it was also greatly influenced by that movie. In fact, the spirit of Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, who in the Avengers movies and in her movie was played by Scarlett Johansson, she weighs very heavily on this, because you could tell that Hawkeye, Clint Barton, who's played by Jeremy Renner, is very much missing her. This show is very much about him basically being one of the few Avengers left standing, definitely the most human one, and trying to just he seems to want to be done with the life of a superhero, because it's taken a toll on him. He's lost friends, he's lost his best friend. They also show that he lost his hearing isn't what it used to be. He has to wear a hearing aid because he's not deaf, but he's very hard of hearing now, especially in one ear. Which is also influenced by the comic book, because while movies definitely influence the show, like most of the shows, it's also influenced by specific comic books. Two to be exact. One of the biggest influence on this show would be the Hawkeye miniseries, or maybe it was actually, no, you know what, I think it was just a series, but it didn't last long, by Matt Fraction and David Aja, AJA, I don't know, which was an okay series. It's mostly highly remembered because of David Aja's great art, but it was fine. I mean, it's about Hawkeye. Hawkeye is literally the most boring Avenger. He's a guy with a fucking bow and arrow. I mean, he just is. So the fact that they make him in any way, shape, or form interesting is a testament to anyone's writing, that you can make him in any way appealing. So he's dealing with the fallout of, basically the Avengers being over. He's done with all the shit he did after his family because when people were wiped from existence, his family was also wiped out. So he was missing his family for 5 years, and now he has them back. So he's given up the hero life, and now he's just trying to live as a mild-mannered person. And he's in New York with his kids, doing some celebrating before Christmas, and they're getting ready to go back home. But on the same night they're doing some celebrating, watching like this, this fucking play that they make. They like a little play they have off of not a play, a musical. They make fun of like Hamilton. They have a musical called Rogers, based on Steve Rogers, and he's watching it and he's none too impressed, and it's just kind of stupid and silly. But while that's happening, we get the story of this girl. Now, the other person who factors heavily into this show, much like in the comic book, is Kate Bishop, who in the show is played by Haley Steinfeld. She's pretty good. She's very likable. She's a good actress. And Kate Bishop, I mean, listen, all the Hawkeyes are boring, but God bless her, she tries. Now, the interesting thing about her is she is yet another Young Avenger character that has been introduced in one of these shows. But this is the one who has been featured even more prominently than the twins were in WandaVision. She's very much... This show is about her as much as it is about Clint. Because it's Clint basically passing, as you come to realize in the end of the show, it's very much Clint passing the baton from, he's done being Hawkeye, so he's passing the baton to her. She gets involved with some shit with her, well, actually, the series starts referencing yet another movie, the original Avengers movie, because you see her as a kid, and she's in New York with her parents, and they're arguing. They're obviously rich, and they're arguing about something. And it's the same day that the attack on New York for the original Avengers movie happens, and part of the building she's in gets blown up, and she sees outside, and she almost gets attacked by an alien, but she gets saved by a stray arrow from Clint Barton, and she sees outside, she sees him fighting a bunch of aliens. So, like, her first introduction to the Avengers and to, superheroics is seeing Clint fighting aliens. Her father dies in the attack, and it's just left with her and her mother, Eleanor Bishop, who's played in the show by Vera Farmiga. Vera Farmiga is, of course, great, and she makes the character of Kate's mother far more interesting than she was in the comic book. I don't really know much about Kate's mother in the comic book. Her father was bigger in the comic books I read when I did read comic books about her. Her father lived in the comic books, and he ended up becoming a crime boss, which, will give you some hint of what's going to happen later on in this series. Kate has grown up. She's learned to fight. She was a fan of the bow and arrow because, Hawkeye is her hero. She ends up getting into some trouble during sort of a rich people's black market auction that she happens to be privy to. She follows this guy named Jack Duskane, who is her mother's fiance. She comes home from college to find that her mother has a fiance by the name of Jack Duskane, who is played by Tony Dalton, who you may know from Better Call Saul. Now, they never quite say it in the show, but Jack Duskane is actually a key character in the comic books in relation to Hawkeye. And in the comic books, Jack Duskane was the name of a character named the Swordsman, who started as a criminal who trained Hawkeye and his brother when they were younger. And he later reformed, like Hawkeye, he later reforms and becomes a hero. They do not call him a swordsman in the show, though they do point out that he is very skilled with a sword and does have a weird obsession with swords. So Kate follows Jack during this auction, but then the auction is attacked by these gangsters. Now, the gangsters are part of a group called the Tracksuit Mafia, who played heavily in the Hawkeye miniseries, or the Hawkeye comic book series, which relates back to that. They're led by this group of the Tracksuit Mafia, being led by a guy who we later find out is named. His name is Kazimierzek, or they just call him Kazi in the show. He's played by a guy named Fra Fee. That's his name, Fra Fee. In the comic book, Kazi was also known as the Clown. He was a hitman known as the Clown. I don't remember how deeply he was involved with the Tracksuit Mafia in the comic books, but it doesn't matter. They're just kind of like merging it because his character is like whatever. But he looks like, some people pointed out, he kind of looks like a bootleg Jon Snow. They attack this black market auction. They're looking for something specific. Like, they're looking for a kind of watch that gets mentioned every now and then, but it's kind of in the background of the show, but ends up being very important. Another thing that was at this auction was the uniform of the vigilante known as Ronin, who, if you remember the movie Avengers Endgame, was actually Hawkeye in disguise. He was kind of lost his mind after his family disappeared, and he went around killing criminals all over the planet. Kate puts on the Ronin costume, fights the bad guys. I don't remember if she didn't get the watch. She saves a dog with one eye, who's also from the comic book, is known as Pizza Dog, but I think is later named Lucky. She gets in trouble because she gets spotted as Ronin, and Clint goes looking for her, but so does the Tracksuit Mob. She gets attacked by the Tracksuit Mob. She almost gets her ass kicked, but Clint saves her and finds her, and he's just basically like, it leads to more problems where they end up losing the suit at one point, and it falls into the hands of a firefighter who's part of a group of LARPers, and the LARPers play heavily into the show, which is kind of silly. There's always the usual Marvel brand of quirkiness and silliness that sometimes feels a little too much, but is whatever. So it's all about getting rid of this it's basically about Hawkeye basically he can't just walk away from his past. He still has things he has left to handle, so he has to bury it. And one of these things is the Ronin thing. Now, Kate and Clint end up at one point being captured by the Tracksuit Mafia, and that's where they find out the Tracksuit Mafia is being run by a woman named Maya Lopez, who is played by Alaqua Cox, who is a real deaf actress, which is fitting because Maya Lopez is a deaf character. In the comic book, she is known as Echo because she is deaf, but she has the unique ability to copy any action she sees. They kind of suggest that in the show, that she's a very good fighter, that she's very good at just observing things and learning things from observation. They don't quite come out and say that she has a superpower, but in the comic books, that's her power. If she sees something, she can instantly copy it. So she's like a really good fighter because of that. She is very interested in the Ronin costume because her father was the original leader of the Tracksuit Mafia, and he was killed by Ronin. And it's very fitting that they both have a connection to Ronin, because in the comic books, Ronin was a vigilante character who originally fought the Hand, but the original Ronin actually, in the comic books, was Maya Lopez, Echo. She was the original Ronin. It wasn't until at one point she was captured that a new Ronin came up, who was played by Clint Barton, Hawkeye. He became Ronin after her. So there is a connection with Ronan between the two. But she has a mat on for Ronan. There's more fighting ensues, and there's car chases and all this cool shit with trick arrows and stuff. As they start looking into it more, they realize there's a connection between the Tracksuit Mafia, and it looks like Kate's mother's Jack Duskane. So they start to think that he is somehow connected to all this, and it looks like he might be funding the tracksuits. But so he gets arrested because, his earlier in the show, his uncle was having a confrontation with Kate's mother, and then later that night he gets killed, and Kate thinks Jack did it, and so that's why she thinks Jack is a criminal. It should be clearly obvious that it's her mother's the criminal. Her mother's the crime boss. She took the place of the father as the crime boss in the show. If that wasn't blatantly obvious to you. So now we have this thing with this watch. There's a crime boss, and then when they try to go get the watch back, they do manage to get the watch back from Echo. It was in her apartment. While they're trying to get the watch back, they get attacked by some random person. Turns out it's Yelena Belova, who was played by Florence Pugh, who you might remember from the Black Widow movie. She's basically the new Black Widow. And it turns out we find out that she got disappeared for 5 years and then came back. And we got a nice interpretation of what that looks like, of what it felt like for someone who disappeared for 5 years and came back, and that they felt something weird happened to them, and then they just sort of came back. Like, it was like basically like a second, they just sort of blipped out of existence. That's what it felt like for them. And then when they come back, the world around them is just different, and they have to adjust to 5 years being gone. Now, she's been hired to kill Clint Barton, but she also has a personal reason, because she believes that Clint Barton killed her sister. And she has to sit down with Kate, and they have these they do this thing in the movies that I don't like, is this weird, like, it's one of the quirky things that I don't like. It's when the quirkiness in the Marvel movies gets a little too much, where she's just sitting down and she's talking to Kate like they're buddies or something, and it's just like, all right, you're enemies. It's like, take this more seriously. I mean, Jesus Christ. I never liked that shit in any movie. All the while, Clint is talking. He keeps calling back home, promising his family he'll be back for Christmas, and he keeps talking to his wife, Laura Barton, who's played by Linda Cardellini, and she's very understanding of what he goes through, because, she's the wife of a spy. Basically, Kate manages to convince Yelena that, she might want to question who she's working for. Yelena reveals to Kate, through a text message, that she is in fact working for let's not even get to that, because Clint ends up having a big confrontation with Maya, basically revealing to her that he is in fact Ronan, and that he said, revealed that, he's sorry for what he did to her, but, he did what he did because, he was a weapon. He reveals he was used because somebody tipped him off to where his father would be that night. And so basically he reveals that somebody in her father's crew set him up to die. And Maya just goes for that right away, and she starts questioning Kazi. And that's when later on we find that Kate gets revealed to her that her mother was the one who hired Yelena. We see a picture of her mother in a meeting with somebody. That meeting was the guy that Clint was worried about getting involved in all of this. And that guy is none other than Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, who is played by Vincent D'Onofrio. So basically, he's the same Kingpin from the Daredevil Netflix series that everybody likes so much. and we see him have a meeting with Eleanor, who says is basically saying that her daughter, she did everything that was asked of her, and she paid back her husband's debt. That's why she ended up working for the Kingpin, because her husband owed him money. And she says, but she's out because her daughter is getting too close, and she can't risk her daughter getting hurt. Kingpin doesn't like that. Then Maya has a meeting with the Kingpin and says, and Kazi, and basically says, hey, I've decided to drop the whole Ronin thing, but she needs some time off. And Kingpin is just like, yes, of course, and he tells her he loves her because he's like an uncle figure to her, but he realizes right away that she knows that he had her father killed, and so everything is falling apart. So he sends Kazi and the tracksuit guys to kill Eleanor at this big meat party she's having. Clint and Kate go to the party with a bunch of new trick arrows. Jack, who got bailed out of jail, ends up at the party, and for some reason he's carrying a sword. And they all sort of are just there for Eleanor to confront her. They manage the tracksuits attack. Clint fights Kazi and a bunch of the tracksuit guys. Kate has a confrontation with Yelena that's somewhat comedic. They basically end up in Rockefeller Plaza. Rockefeller Plaza? That's what I'm trying to say. And we see the two of them fighting, where they're wearing their more modern comic influenced costumes. They make a joke about Clint's original costume in the show, but he's wearing the more modern costume where he has like the weird purple, arrowhead icon on the shirt. And they have a big fight with all their trick arrows with all the tracksuit guys. After beating a bunch of them, Kate goes to look for her mother, who has somehow slipped out of the building. Maya has a confrontation with Kazi because she knows that he set her father up. And Clint fights Yelena, but he doesn't really fight her. He refuses to kind of fight her because he knows that Yelena is Natasha's sister. And he just tries to tell her that, it's like, I didn't kill your sister, I tried to save her, but she wouldn't let me, she sacrificed herself for the world and everything. And he manages to convince Yelena to stop, and she listens eventually. Maya kills Kazi during their fight, but she isn't happy about it. Kate confronts her mother, who is being attacked by the Kingpin. She fights the Kingpin, and he wrecks her shit for a while, but she manages to use one of her exploding trick arrows to take him down. But he does manage to escape, and Kate's mother gets thrown in prison. But as he's trying to escape, we see Maya confront the Kingpin, and she points a gun at him, and then the camera pans up and we hear a gunshot. So we don't actually see him die, so maybe he's not dead. But at the same time, it definitely made it seem like he could be. But it would be a huge waste of his character to do that. So hopefully he's not. I don't know how much longer Vincent D'Onofrio wants to keep doing that, but hopefully they don't just waste him, because he's great as the character. And I would like it if he was around more. And there's always ways that they could get around that. I mean, it's comic book shit. Let's see. What else? That's it. Then basically the whole situation has been solved. Clint's put everything to rest. He manages to get back home on Christmas Day. He takes Kate with him to meet his family with the dog Lucky. And while they're watching their kids open stuff on Christmas morning, Clint hands his wife the watch that was the initial source of all of this, what the whole robbery was initially about. He's like, look what I found. And he says, you better keep a better hold of this. And she turns the watch over, and you see there's a shield symbol with the number 19 on it, suggesting that Laura Barton is in fact used to be a shield agent, Agent 19 particularly, which is a shout out to the comic books, because in the comic books, Agent 19 was Bobby Morse, who was also known as Mockingbird, who in the comic books was at one point Hawkeye's wife. So it's kind of a reference to that. And then the series ends with him burning the Ronin costume, basically putting all that behind him, and Kate trying to figure out what her superhero name is going to be, and Clint basically just goes, "Hey, I have an idea," and then it just flashes to the Hawkeye screen, basically saying she's Hawkeye now because he's done with it. And then you get a nice little happy holidays message from Marvel, and then the after credits thing is them just showing the musical scene from Rogers, which was silly and cute and whatever. Didn't expect much from that, but overall it was a fine series. Not my favorite of the the fucking Marvel TV show series, but it was fine. It's like everything else about Hawkeye. That's the best you can hope, is that it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Like I said, it's Hawkeye. He's not an interesting character. He's a guy with a fucking bow and arrow. He's literally the most boring Avenger. The fact that they can make him in any way, shape, or form interesting is a testament to, the production and writing skills of the people involved. So, yeah. So, Hawkeye, it gets a thumb up. And like I said, it gave us the biggest introduction. It gave us the biggest, showing of a young Avenger character, which I really do feel like they're building towards here. They're definitely building towards something with the young Avengers. I know they are. You can see it. It's clear what's going on. But we'll see. We will see. But yeah, that's it. Hawkeye, one thumb up. Decent show. I like Jeremy Renner and Haley Steinfeld. They're both good. So I look forward to seeing what's next from Marvel. Alright. It's time for bed. Have a good night, folks.